Business operations as a whole has been something that I've always liked, but I used to think of people would be like, oh, that's so boring. But you won't have a business if you don't have systems and frameworks and processes in place. I am not a operate in theory type of a person. I'm definitely you need to get some wins and some losses to learn what works and what doesn't. Where can you make that 1% increase, that 1% difference, where you're able to just, relax and do the things that you love. Welcome back, Bomu Bestie. Hold on. If you're new here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I'm your host, Claudia, and welcome to She Built Success. Here on this channel, I talk about you, my Bomu Besties, and how you can make the best of life and business, because why can't we combine the two? All right, so this episode, I want to talk about frameworks. I want to talk about them specifically in the context of business building. What I've discovered, not only in season 4 of the podcast, but just throughout my journey in business as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, as a creative, right? I've discovered that I love frameworks. And it's not like a novel, I love frameworks. That is how I function and how I operate. So much so that it's built into just about everything I do, whether it's for business or it's personal. I've talked about the linear planning suite that I created, and that's basically I didn't come up with the idea, but it's the ability to see your calendar for the whole 12 months. You see it in an 11 by 17 sheet of paper if you were to print it out. I've actually printed mine out I should have printed it out for this episode. I didn't think about that, but I'll do that maybe next time, or maybe I'll link a picture of it or something like that. But anyway, it allows you to see your calendar or your full year at a glance, but it's the months go horizontally and the days of the week, other way around, the months go vertically and the days of the week go horizontally. And then your activities fill up the boxes, kind of like a Gantt chart. That was probably my most recent type of a system or creation that I did. And what that does is help me to see what the year looks like. That's things like the podcast, and when I need to start looking for guests, and when I need to start filming, and when episodes are due by, and what that timeline looks like. And because we split the podcast up into two halves, 12 and 12 to make 24 for a season, when are those milestone markers? And so that's an example of how I use it in terms of business. But then for personal, it's layering in the longer term things like vacation or time off, time with the family, longer running events, not necessarily the day-to-day, because for me, day-to-day is like my actual calendar. So it's like the most recent iteration of what I've done to implement another system, a new system, in my overall just workflow. But I also created over the years a number of trademarks that allow for businesses to self-identify where they are in their process, whether they're just beginning or they're already scaling. And those type of frameworks are good because it helps to bring to light sometimes where your marketing is broken in your business. You might not be able to see that. And I recognize that not everybody wants to know, or not, I should say wants to know, not everybody is aware that they have a problem. I would say the way that sometimes problems in business creep up is frustrations, or if something's happening repeatedly that is frustrating, whether it's from the client or within your own team, or sometimes with yourself, that usually indicates that there's a breakdown somewhere in the process of what you're working towards. And so I've created different frameworks to kind of help flesh out and assess where things are. And I mean, these are things from funnels to marketing to your content strategy to just how if you have a new idea, what that's going to look like, what are the steps that you need to go through to make that idea actually come to fruition. Because if one thing's for sure, I am not a operate in theory type of a person. I'm definitely you need to go ahead and get some experience. You need to get this under your belt. You need to get some wins and some losses to learn what works and what doesn't. And so I'm saying all that to say that frameworks are important. And there was a time for me coming just into this whole entrepreneurship journey. And I have always wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I will say that. I have always wanted to own my own business. And that was just, I knew that, right? And so for me, my path was to start in corporate, get the experience, learn what I liked and didn't like, and then implement what I liked in my business, and then iterate and do better on the things that, did well for the business. And so being able to be self-aware for me and knowing that there are systems and frameworks and processes that I need to follow in order to see those things out was helpful for me. And so some of them I turned into solutions, tools, packages, offerings for my clients and others who are in business and interested in that particular path. So to me, frameworks aren't just about the boring stuff. I mean, yes, for sure. I'll say, and this is where I was going initially, I used to feel like frameworks, for me, they've always been necessary, or systems, just that structure, standard operating procedures, business operations as a whole has been something that I've always liked. But I used to think of people would be like, oh, that's so boring. And the truth of the matter is, I guess depending on who's talking about it, can maybe sometimes sound kind of dry, but you don't have a business if you don't have systems and frameworks and processes in place. How do you onboard? How do you offboard? How do you roll off? How do you re-engage? How do you market? Do you do it one way for one line of business and a different way for a different line of business? Like, how should your team be contacting you? Or do they not contact you and you have somebody else in a role that is, kind of the conduit between them? So it's really just, for me, I've recognized over the years that the way I think of systems, it's almost like, well, yeah, everybody does it. Apparently not. And so it's been interesting just to see, like I told you, this whole season, I've been literally rebuilding elements and components of my business, because I'm at an age now, because I'm 40, I'm about to be, but by the time y'all see this, I will be, my birthday would have done come and gone, but I'm about to be 43, which I'm super stoked about. And it's like, okay, so what's next in business? Now, I will say that for me, some of the frameworks that I created, I am actually implementing myself again, like going through it myself as if it's the first time. And it's been very interesting to see some of there's this one particular, I created this tool called a marketing formula, and it would tell you like where the gaps are in your funnel, essentially. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, I could see some pieces that I could tweak or do a little bit different now that I've been in the business for, it's about to be 20 years next year. Crappers. 20 years, but as my own company since 2014. So yeah, that's about where we are. And so it's really been me going through and marking those steps. And it's kind of refreshing, because I will say the marketing formula I came up with 2019 or 18. I actually got to go look. It's been a while. I mean, I've had the formula for a while. When I stopped working with small businesses after 2021, and that was a choice to grow my government contracting line of business. But when I stopped working with them, that's when I kind of stopped bringing it out so much to the forefront. But it helps to identify where your gaps are from the top of funnel all the way to the bottom of funnel. And it's actually pretty dope, because the way I created it, you basically get to identify the areas or the pocket that you need to improve on. You might have, like, for instance, a lead magnet, right? But you might not have a way to do follow-up after a client rolls off. So like it's kind of just identifying where your gaps are and where you could improve. And I can remember when I first created it, it almost felt like to me, it was like, well, yeah, duh, these are all the steps. Like, you need to know where there's holes so you can fix them. And I recognize that that's not the case. Not everybody wants to spend the time. They kind of just want to do I'm not gonna say one hit wonders, but the very flashy or fancy or gets a lot of engagement type work, versus the foundational stuff, which is having the back end in place and making sure that your structures are solid and sound, and making sure that you have a great customer experience. And I've talked about customer experience or client experience in past episodes, and really just how you cultivate that. But like, do you have that in place? Hell, even to the point of onboarding new team members. Like, I have a tool that I use that goes through the entire process, and it's a workflow, if you will. I created the workflow, and like the way my brain works is definitely workflows and structures. Like, I'm thinking like I'm doing this, but in my brain I see hierarchies and I see different things. And I see, when I come across a problem, I don't look at it as like, oh crap, I can't solve it. It's okay, what can be implemented? How can this be systematized? And how can we execute so that we can get information back to make improvements, even if they're incremental improvements? I mean, I can remember, let me see, the most recent example for me was onboarding a team member and going through, so I have like a 30, 60, 90 checkpoint, the days checkpoint when someone new is on the team, and we have windows where they schedule a call. We talk about, performance. We talk about what could be done better. There's just normal improvement conversations and, what's good and what's working. And I can remember when I first started this system, because it wasn't really as automated as it is now, it was crap. It's about 45 days. Let me go and follow up instead of the 30, 60, 90. And so it's just recognizing, wanting to be able to give new team members feedback. And then it's, of course, as they've stayed longer. We still have touch points, but I'm pretty interactive. I like to give feedback real time or in the moment, so that we can continue to do what's working or improve what's not. And so that was like team wise for me. That was probably my most recent system, with the exception of, because I talked about this too, with the exception of my team Airtable based, and that's the one where we have the different tasks and things that we're working on as a team. We could see it at a high level. We can see everybody's task. We can see our own task, and we kind of just check them off as we go. Especially with comes to the podcast. Now, the podcast systems, y'all know I love Airtable, so let me talk a little bit about that. Airtable for us is everything. We use it for content. We use it for the podcast. Obviously, it's considered content, but content to me in this regard is the podcast is its own base, and then our digital media calendar, which is equivalent to a content calendar, is a separate base. But I do have automations that feed the two. It's actually the podcast feeds the digital media calendar, or DMC as we call it here. And for me, it was a lot of trial and error on the podcast as far as what works, what doesn't. Season 4 is actually different from all the other seasons. I will say that in a good way. I wanted to do stuff that was more real time, whereas typically before we would batch record 12 episodes, and then we would batch record the second half of the 12 episodes, and then that would be the season. This season, it's been a little more. There was some batch recording, and then now here, because we have the studio here, I am able to record a little more real time than I was in the past. And so it's been pretty cool because it allows me to, talk about what's really happening now and what I'm experiencing and what I'm going through versus it being like 6 and 8 months old. So, but in order to get to that process, I had to evaluate, like, what does everything look like? Like, what are our deliverables? What are we getting back post-production? What do we need to send to get edited? And then even in the editing process, now we don't edit. J. August Media still edits us because that is a real thing. He does post-production. He's the one who brings all the blooper reels for us and puts those together. And so him and his team have definitely, I just genuinely love. I've been working with them since 23. Oh, Lord, you're going to give me the line. Why'd I even try to call a year? I want to say 23, but I felt like it was like 22. It was 20. We started to, we had initial discussion in 22. 23 is when we did our first project. 23, we did our first creative project. We was traveling. We was jet setting in the United States, y'all. Because I just wanted to travel. And so I was like, let's go so-and-so and I'll talk about stuff. And so that's what we did 23. Anyway, let me get back to the podcast. So the base for this. So we actually have it where I'll like bullet point episodes and have a theme. Every season has a theme. And then there are sub themes within the episode. Within the season, so that I can mark episodes. And if we ever need to classify, figure out where things go, we know where they are. But then we have processes like we run back the film and it's not film, but you know what I mean? We run back the tapes and we pull out pieces for transcript. And then once we go through transcript, we pull out quotables and we pull out highlights and things like that. And then we have another process where we pull out reels. And there's like a workflow that reels, shorts, verticals, however you want to call it, segments. We have a workflow where we move the episode along. And so when we get deliverables back or we're due to submit deliverables, like we see the episode kind of walk through on our back end, walk through Airtable, and we can see at any point in time where it is. But then there's notifications. Like if something comes back from post-production, then there's a notification that goes out to the team because they have components that they have to do, like uploading to YouTube and making sure we have captions and making sure we have hashtags and, all the elements that go into creating content. And so I'm saying all that to say, like, that is a probably more in depth than I intended walkthrough of how I think in my brain. It's like, I don't like it when something can't be automated. And I get everything can't be automated. So let me be careful when I say that. I don't like when something that should be automated isn't automated. And so I do my best to automate or manage and make efficiencies within the company. Podcast is one of those examples. Another area that I use this in, I use it in a lot of places, but another area that I use it in is, and I mentioned a little bit earlier, was the digital media calendar. So for that is going across platforms. So that's Instagram, that's LinkedIn, that's Threads. I used to do email, but I took email out of that. So I don't do email in that anymore, but those three. Now, we use Airtable to basically organize the content, not to schedule it out. We use a different tool to schedule out content, but if you want me to talk about that, I'll talk about that in another episode. But the whole point, there's checks and balances there. There's copy that needs to be done. There's graphics that need to be created. Shout out to my graphics design team. There are elements of approvals that need to happen. And so those also have notifications, both for approval or if something needs to be tweaked. There's just a whole workflow that happens there where I'm not sitting in, at my desk waiting for somebody to message me to tell me something needs to be checked or to tell me something is good to go or published or what have you. Like, there's a whole workflow behind the scenes that take care of that. So I guess I'm saying all that to say, like, look at your systems, whether it's in business or personal, and determine like where your gaps are. And if you need help, dude, totally DM me. I'm at Boldly Claudia on every social platform. YouTube is She Built Success. So I definitely would encourage you to look at where in your workflow, where in your life, where in your business could you implement workflows and systems to make things just a little bit better. I'm not asking you don't need to do what I'm doing per se, but if there's something that you can take a checks and balance with and say, hey, I feel like my marketing here is lacking, so maybe you're not getting enough leads. What do you need to do to fix that? How could you fix that? And it's not necessarily being so in your face on social, right? It really is. It might be a messaging issue and not your presence. Your presence you're consistent there, but your messaging isn't. And so it's really looking at that. And so for me, I've created frameworks to help evaluate all that stuff. So yeah, I just encourage you to look at where in your business or where in life can you tweak something just a little bit, just to give you a little bit more time and a little bit more sanity, because we don't got time to be sitting here stuck to our phones and our computers all day. I will say that. And that's part of the reason why I like the efficiencies and being able to streamline things. All right, so Bold Move Bestie, your homework is to do just that. Look at your business and look at your life and see where can you make that 1% increase, that 1% difference, where you're able to just, relax and do the things that you love. Let me know in the comments what you came up with. Like, where's that gap that you're going to look at to make that small incremental difference? All right, Bold Move Besties, until next time, I will catch you on the next episode of She Built Success. Deuces.